I really appreciate your attendance today at this very special announcement. So first of all, I'm Tom Hiles, and I'm Vice Chancellor for University Advancement. And of the many wonderful things about my job, this is my favorite, when we get to announce a very special commitment from a very special alum and the sacrifices that all of our alumni and friends provide in supporting the university. I would like to introduce our platform party, first of all. MU's Chancellor Brady Deaton you'll hear from in a minute. Gary Myers, our Dean and the Earl F. Nelson Professor of Law. And then Tom Lambert, the Wall Chair in Corporate Law and Governance. You'll be hearing from all those individuals in a minute. Not here today, but this gift was only made possible by the generosity of the Nancy and Charles Wall Family Foundation. And I wanted, Dr. Deaton will share more about Mr. Wall and his career in a little bit, but Chuck was a 1970 graduate of the law school, very prominent graduate. And it was Chuck's choice to allow MUs to announce this gift without him being here. He's a very humble individual. And he provided this support, but again, actually we had to kind of talk him into allowing us to use his name at all on the chair. So we're really privileged to have and honored to have his name on the chair. So it's a great day for the law school and MU. It's an especially exciting day because I'll just mention in brief that Dean Myers and Mark Langworthy and I had the pleasure of visiting with Chuck shortly after Dean Myers started, and this is one of his first visits with a donor. And not only did Mr. Wall commit to the gift that Dr. Deaton will announce in a minute, but he added additional funds to be able to start the professorship right away. So it was an amazing visit, and Dean Myers told me that he expects to do that on every donor visit from now on. So having said that, gifts of this magnitude to MU were never the result of just one person, whether it's a dean or a development officer, but always start with an alumnus with a generosity and a connection to MU that has many years in coming. But I also want to thank Dean Larry Dessem, who's here. I think, Larry, are you here? Glad you could join us. And also the late Dean Tim Hines, who was involved and engaged with Chuck during their tenures as deans, and Ken Dean, who couldn't be with us today because of a previous commitment, who also was very engaged with Chuck, who also told me that he told Chuck to think big, and Chuck replied that he was a big thinker. So we appreciate Ken and all of our deans' involvement in this wonderful gift announcement today. And then finally, I want to thank also from our team, Janie Harmon and Mark Langworthy, who were instrumental in bringing this gift to fruition as well. But I believe you all have the program, but our order today will be the Chancellor, then Dean Myers, then Professor Lambert in that order. So with no further ado, it's my very nice pleasure to introduce my boss, Chancellor Brady J. Deaton, for the announcement.
Tom, thank you. And when you think of the alums of the law school, there are many. They're very enthusiastic, as Tom has indicated, and to see a gift come forward from one of those is particularly exciting. And I look back and Dudley McCarter walks in the room, another alum and chair of the Missouri 100 now. Dudley, thank you also particularly for being with us this morning, and many others that I won't be announcing. But it's great to see everybody here, and this is a very exciting gift announcement for us. And we're celebrating the generosity of the Nancy and Charles Wall Family Foundation, a 1970 graduate of our School of Law with a very successful career in the realm of corporate law. Chuck is a shining example of the University of Missouri's law school long and proud tradition of producing outstanding lawyers. Not only do they occupy essentially every county in Missouri in their practice, but in all 50 states and in over 20 countries around the world. And that began way back in 1872, so it's not been a new phenomenon. And if you go around the country and around the world, as we do from time to time visiting with the Alumni Association events, you see these very successful graduates of the School of Law in many, many positions, and certainly our governor and our attorney general here in Missouri, members of the Senate and the House, corporate executives of the highest order, and just partners also in some of the greatest law firms and corporations in the United States. So it's truly an inspiring and really a very humbling experience when you see alums like Chuck who want to give back to the university and share what they have done, their success, with the institution that enabled them to achieve these successes. And in this case, the Walls wanted to build on the existing strengths that we have here at the University of Missouri, very much consistent with the long-term strategic plan of our university. Law schools around the country are building on areas of emphasis, and here at our law school, as many of you are aware, the Center for the Study of Dispute Resolution represents one of those types of strengths. The area of corporate law is also another major strength of our School of Law. So ensuring the continued excellence of faculty here at the law school so that we can maintain our leadership in these critical areas is what we want to achieve as a university, and it's that spirit that Chuck Wall chose to support so that we can attract and retain outstanding faculty members through endowed faculty positions here at the University of Missouri. And so with that theme in mind, it's a great pleasure for me to announce that the Nancy and Charles Wall Family Foundation has made a gift of $1.57 million to establish the Wall Chair in Corporate Law and Governance. And that's worthy of a round of applause for everyone. And that really brings honor and recognition to the existing faculty and its leadership, the deans, to the alums who, as a corporate group, are so supportive of the School of Law, and certainly to the many students who are here enjoying the benefits of that kind of quality education. As I indicated earlier, this allows us to compete with the best, to be the best, and to build strength upon strength to ensure that we can continue to mature in these areas of great strength for our university. It raises our stature, it advances our research and our educational mission, and adds to the quality of the graduates of the School of Law as they go out into those many fields of work that graduates of School of Law do. This gift merges the career and passion of Mr. Wall with this great strength at MU, so it's really a win-win kind of situation for all. And it will impact future generations of law school students and faculty as we look to the future. So I want to express my sincere thanks on behalf of the University of Missouri to Charles Wall and his sister Nancy for their continued support of Mizzou. And it gives me great pleasure in saying that, congratulations, to turn to the leader of the School of Law at this time, Dean Gary Myers. Dean of the School of Law and the Earl F. Nelson Professor of Law, Dean Myers.
Good morning and welcome, and thank you all for coming on this beautiful fall day here in Columbia. I'm very pleased about the announcement that the Chancellor just made, and I want to thank him and Tom Hiles for their remarks and comments. It's a great pleasure for me to be here today as well. These are exciting times for the School of Law. Not only do we have this gift announcement this morning, but next Thursday we'll be announcing the establishment of a Veterans Clinic at the University of Missouri School of Law, which will assist veterans and their families with benefits issues and other matters. So these are indeed exciting times. Let me also share with you that the Wall Chair in Corporate Law and Governance is part of a broader plan for the School of Law. As the Chancellor mentioned, law schools are increasingly focusing on areas of specialization, and it is our long-term plan to establish a second center of excellence at the law school to go along with the Center for the Study of Dispute Resolution. That center will focus on intellectual property, entrepreneurship, and innovation. And the Wall Chair is a critical part of that overall plan. In the long run, our hope will be to have chairs not only in corporate law, but also in intellectual property, real estate, and entrepreneurship. We're also hoping to establish within a year a small business startup clinic, which will assist local businesses, university researchers, and others in establishing businesses, corporations, and protecting their intellectual property rights and establishing corporate entities that can expand the local, state, and national economy. So there are many things going on at the law school, and I'm very pleased to share those with you today. I also want to talk a little bit about the donors in today's event. Nancy and Chuck Wall are great philanthropists. They're involved in many different ventures around the country. Chuck, in particular, is a great fan of music, musical theater, and opera. He's chairman of the board of the New York City Opera. He's involved in the Aspen Music Festival and the Neurosciences Institute in La Jolla. So he has many broad interests. But one of his fundamental interests comes from his background. Chuck Wall was the consummate corporate lawyer. He began his career at Shook, Hardy & Bacon in Kansas City, a very fine, long-established firm here in the state. He then went on to be in-house counsel at Philip Morris and Altria. And in those roles, he developed a great and deep understanding of the role of the corporate lawyer, both as outside counsel with independent judgment and as in-house counsel, exercising legal judgment as well and advising corporations on the compliance with corporate and other regulatory laws governing them in this country. And so Chuck has a real interest in corporate law and governance, and he expressed that in making this gift, and I'm very pleased that Tom Lambert will be the first recipient of that gift. And I want to talk a little bit about Tom, but first in general about the importance of a chair. As has been mentioned by both Brady and Tom, a chair and professorships like those that we're announcing today serve a basic and fundamental role in attracting and retaining the best faculty that we can have. And this is a difficult environment because we compete with schools that have tuition levels that are 2 and 3 times higher than the University of Missouri School of Law. We compete with schools that have larger endowments, that have more funds available. And so the gift that we received and announced today serves to level that playing field and make us competitive with the best law schools in this country. And frankly, the story of Tom Lambert and the Wall Chair fits directly into that story. Tom last year was a visiting professor at the University of Minnesota School of Law, top 25 law school, a school with great resources and great reputation and really cold winters. And I believe that was a very important factor in Tom's decision to come back to us, come back to the University of Missouri. But the Wall Chair also plays a role in that. It eliminates the financial gap that exists between the very well-funded schools, such as the University of Minnesota, and our own institution. It enables us to compete. And that's fundamentally important because the core of any university is its faculty. Now, I want to talk a little bit about Tom Lambert himself. Tom epitomizes the kind of faculty member we try to attract, recruit, and retain at the University of Missouri School of Law. Tom is a graduate of Wheaton College and the University of Chicago Law School, where he was on law review and graduated with honors. He then clerked for the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, Judge Jerry Smith. He then served as an Olin Fellow at Northwestern University School of Law, and then practiced law with the firm of Sidley Austin in Chicago before joining this faculty. He is a scholar in the area of corporate law, antitrust law, and contracts. But it's not just that he's a great scholar. Tom Lambert is a great teacher. And you can know that when you talk to any of his students about his teaching. You can know that because when Tom holds a party at his house for a student organization, half the student body shows up. Some of them aren't even members of the organization, I'm pretty sure. So, Tom is not only the consummate scholar, but he's a great teacher. And it's important to recognize the synergy that can exist between creative scholarship, cutting-edge scholarship, and great teaching. Tom also is a blogger, working on the Truth on Market blog, which plays a fundamental role in discussions of markets and economics in today's high-tech world. So we're very proud to have Tom Lambert as the holder of the first Wall Family Foundation Chair in Corporate Law and Governance, and I introduce him to you now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gary, for those really kind remarks. I am incredibly honored to have been named the inaugural Wall Chair. I had the pleasure of dining with Mr. Wall a couple of times, once with Dean Larry Dessum, and then once again with Dean Myers. I also had the pleasure of hosting him in my class. He came to contracts to talk to my students about his experience as a corporate lawyer. And I also hosted him at my home with Dean Myers, where he, I believe the proper term would be held court in my kitchen and just answered questions from a whole bunch of students who were interested in corporate issues. He is a wonderful conversationalist. He's remarkably charming. We immediately hit it off. But beyond just hitting it off, it became clear to me in my encounters with Mr. Wall that he and I strongly concur on three matters. The first is that among legal institutions, the business corporation is practically unrivaled in its ability to generate economic prosperity and distribute it widely among society. I remember Mr. Wall saying almost exactly those words at the dinner that I shared with Dean Myers. You don't hear that sort of remark in polite conversation very often, but it certainly resonated with me. He wrote me a letter last fall, and this is something he said in the letter. The corporation is a genius of capitalism. The corporate business structure has created more wealth for more people than any other business form. It permits unlimited investment with limited liability. With trillions of dollars of capital investment, the American corporation is unsurpassed in delivering unprecedented returns to investors. And investors need never fear that their risks will exceed their invested amount. Legislation and entrepreneurs created this juggernaut, resulting in financial security for countless Americans. I think he's absolutely right about that. The second thing that Mr. Wall and I agree on is that there is a need, if the corporation is to perform its function, for strong and effective corporate governance. Now, I don't see any of my former business organization students out there, so this won't be a repeat, but if there were some, they've heard this many, many times. The distinguishing characteristic of the business corporation, what separates it from a partnership and different types of business entities, is the separation of ownership and control. Those who control the company don't own the residue. They don't own what's left over after everybody's been paid off. That belongs to the shareholders. It's different in a partnership. The partners are the owners and the controllers. And it is the separation of ownership and control that allows corporations to do what they do, because they can raise money from lots and lots of passive investors. The problem when you have a separation of ownership and control is that we have what economists would call agency costs. The agent, the controller, holding somebody else's money, has an incentive to shirk and an incentive to act opportunistically. And if they do so, then losses result, losses for the investors, and then all sorts of social inefficiencies. The traditional response to this problem of agency costs has been to posit these fiduciary duties. So every state has its corporate law, and states compete for corporate charters, and under state corporate law, managers, officers, and directors have fiduciary duties that they owe to the shareholders. These fiduciary duties correspond to the types of agency costs we see. The duty of care requires that managers do their best. The duty of loyalty requires that managers not act opportunistically. Throughout our history, this scheme has worked pretty well in constraining agency costs, but we have seen occasionally very widespread crises in corporate governance. And we really saw that in the first decade of this century. 2000 to 2010 was bookended with crises in corporate governance. We began the decade with the failure of Enron and the failure of WorldCom. The result was legislation from Congress called Sarbanes-Oxley that has the federal government very involved in corporate governance matters, an area where it hasn't been traditionally involved in the past. The end of the decade saw the financial crisis, and the response to that was the Dodd-Frank Law of 2010, which once again involves the federal government in corporate governance matters. There could not be a better time to study corporate governance. I mean, we're doing things that we've never done before. And I'm very excited to be able to be part of this conversation, to explore what works and what doesn't work. This is a very key time in this field. The third key matter that Mr. Wall and I agree on is that Mizzou law does legal education the right way. I very much enjoyed in our conversations hearing him talk about his interactions with professors. They obviously influenced him. I have heard throughout my decade here at Mizzou, I've heard lots of folks talk about the fox and the bull. These are apparently professors from Mr. Wall's time at the law school. I like to think that if there were a fox and a bull today, I would be the fox, but that's probably not the case. More like the raccoon or maybe the possum. But in our conversations, it was very clear to me that these individuals had very much influenced Mr. Wall, made him the lawyer that he is. So he appreciates the role of the teacher as well as the role of the scholar. He believes very strongly in scholarship, but understands that it really should be part of what a teacher does. And I absolutely agree with him. Law schools these days have sort of separated themselves into schools where the professors just do scholarship and teaching is an afterthought, and some schools where the professors just teach students how to pass the bar, but they're not very much engaged in the life of the mind. I think we do it absolutely right. My colleagues on the law school faculty are both teachers and scholars. They understand that in order to be a really good teacher, you need to be a good scholar, because a great teacher doesn't just provide information, she inspires students to come along on the intellectual journey. And in order to do that, you've got to be on the intellectual journey yourself. In addition, you can't really be a great scholar without being a great teacher, because at the end of the day, your scholarship is worthless if you can't communicate it to people. And so this dichotomy between teaching and scholarship is something that I very much dislike. And it's also something that I believe Mr. Wall very much dislikes. And it's clear to me that he wants this role, the Wall Chair, to be a position that integrates scholarship with teaching. So in the letter that he sent me, he emphasized teaching. He says, after talking about the recent financial crisis and some causes for the crisis, he says, whatever the cause or causes, I think the case can be made that lawyers should have been more heavily involved in whatever discussions were taking place. The tough questions remain. Are lawyers, in-house and outside, trained as to their responsibilities in advising the board and management? And are they trained as how to properly fulfill those responsibilities? Obviously, some don't know the former, others the latter. Notice the emphasis on training. He wants this to be a role where we are training lawyers. At the end of the letter, he says, not only should law students be taught what corporations are, how they operate, and the laws that govern their existence and operations, they should also be taught the multiple roles lawyers, both in-house and outside, play in the life of the corporation. So he's very interested in effective teaching that cannot occur without effective scholarship. I'm totally on board with that plan. I could not be more pleased that Chuck and Nancy Wall have chosen to invest in this particular area of inquiry and at this particular law school. I pledge to do my best to ensure a lucrative return on their investment. And I very much appreciate the support that I've gotten from my colleagues on the law faculty over the last decade, and thank you all for coming out today. Thanks.
So very well said, Tom. And if I was going to have a commercial tomorrow with our National Campaign Cabinet coming on this weekend to talk about the impact of endowed chairs and professorships, Brady, this would be it. I really enjoyed that discourse, and there will be a test later, so I hope you all took good notes. But we will have time for questions and answers afterwards with the media. So again, thank you for joining us, and we'll be around as long as you need to. Thank you.